管是有问题的时候，或预判有问题的才去管。但是我们现在管的能力越来越强，监的能力明显不足。好的创新不怕监管，但是怕左。
Innovation doesn't fear regulation, but it does fear regulation by yesterday's methods. These are the provoking words of Jack Ma. He uttered them to hundreds, if not thousands, of executives present at the Bund Financial Summit in Shanghai in October of 2020. At the summit, he criticized China's banking regulations and, by extension, the CCP. One can say that these were the famous last words of Jack Ma before everything in his life turned upside down. Jack Ma had poked the CCP bear, and he paid dearly for it.
Jack Ma, billionaire.
Tech tycoon.
China's second richest man.
Has been MIA.
Not been seen in public since October.
Has made a powerful enemy.
When he blasted Chinese regulators in a speech that drew fire.
The Chinese president, Xi Jinping.
Jack Ma hasn't been seen in public. Many are questioning, where is Jack Ma?
The tale of Jack Ma has taken many twists and turns, from poverty to extreme wealth to dwindling wealth, from being the star of China to disappearing without a trace. The tale of Jack Ma is a cautionary one. It's a tale of what happens the moment the CCP decides to come after you. It's a tale of how useless capitalism is in the face of raw political power and an unjust system. Much like the story of Jack Ma, some of my videos are unjustly suppressed and demonetized by YouTube. The worst part of all of this, you guys don't get to hear about the news after I've spent days making a video. This is why I launched a newsletter called Global Recaps, where I'll send the most important global news stories straight to your inbox 2 times a week. This way, there's no middleman like YouTube deciding what stories you should see and which you shouldn't. The newsletter is completely free, and you can sign up by clicking the link below. Jack Ma has gone from a global entrepreneurial figure that all of China revered to a lesson of what happened to a modern-day Icarus. To properly understand how the CCP, under the leadership of President Xi Jinping, disarmed and dismembered the legacy of Jack Ma, we first need to understand the billionaire and his empire. Ma had humble beginnings, a fact that made all that came later in his life all the more valuable. He was born in 1964 to an ordinary family in Hongqiao. His parents worked as performers in the art of traditional musical storytelling. Considering that Ma was raised in this environment, it can explain, at least in part, his ability to capture a crowd and paint a picture with just his words. What's remarkable about his upbringing is that, unlike your regular Bill Gates or Steve Jobs story, Ma was never really academically inclined or well put together. It actually took him 3 years to pass the country's toughest test to get into college after several attempts. Growing up, even KFC turned him down for a restaurant job just because of how disheveled he always looked. His eventual entry into college was not even based on his mathematical prowess, but on the English skills that he had. These are the skills he had picked up as he spent years showing foreigners around his coastal city hometown. See everyone, even these so-called mundane tasks or jobs, they can help you in life. In the 90s, he began pushing for the internet in China, at a time when barely anyone knew what the internet was or why it was viable. This culminated in him starting an internet startup company during his teaching years post-graduation. The internet startup, named China Pages, served to create web pages for businesses. The foundations had been laid. By the mid-90s, China was changing fast as the then Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping was embracing change. This gave Jack Ma the space to grow his China Pages just as the nation was embracing this new era. His relationship with the company ended sadly, however, when he was forced to sell it to a local champion in Hongqiao who was state-backed. For years to come, that experience shaped what Ma defined as his relationship with the state. As we shall later find out, when it came to state matters, he always kept it respectful but distanced. Ma would often tell his employees that when it came to the government, be in love with the government, but don't marry them. This would also explain why, though Ma was a CCP party member, he never joined China's four-show parliament, the National People's Congress, or its consultative body. This was a deviation from most of his big league counterparts, who cozied up to the CCP as much as they could. Having served in the government for a little bit and gathered experience in various circles, in 1999, Ma, together with his friends, conjured and realized their dream to launch Alibaba. This was a company that was aimed to be a bridge between Chinese factories that had cheap goods and buyers around the world. The key part was that this was going to happen online, over the internet. The idea was a success, to say the least. China was filled with inexpensive goods that could be manufactured in its industries, and the world became an open market with Alibaba connecting suppliers with buyers. It became the start of something grand. Over the years that followed, Ma built Alibaba into a strong company that gained the envy of everyone globally. By 2015, Ma's influence was undeniable. He was not only China's richest man, but he was a global icon. In previous years, he had fought with Yahoo and some other foreign investors over the runnings of his company. But those squabbles didn't diminish investor appetite for the $25 billion float of Alibaba in New York in 2014. What this meant was that Alibaba was the world's largest ever stock market flotation. Tech companies such as Ant, a derivative of Alibaba that Ma controlled, had begun to show the world that China could innovate too. Ma became a symbol of what was possible as the government promoted entrepreneurship to alleviate pressure on finding work for millions of new university graduates. With the state's backing, Ma's empire was growing. At this point, the CCP held him close, with Ma even accompanying President Xi to the US on a visit. Just a quick reminder to hit that like button. Your likes help out the videos reach tremendously with the YouTube algorithm, and it helps me out a lot to see videos reach new people. So remember to scroll down and smash that like button. One could say that Ma's fall was predictable and could be seen from a mile away, and honestly, they wouldn't be wrong. As Ma grew in influence, both his cockiness and that of his company grew. This can be evidenced when they were called out by a regulator in 2015 for selling counterfeit goods, and they responded by saying on social media, "Director Liu Hongliang, you're breaking the rules. Stop being a crooked referee." And while a peaceful resolution was reached between Alibaba and regulators, many saw this as a sign of Ma challenging the greater authority, which, by extension, is the CCP. As Ma continued to travel around the globe and meet officials of various countries, being viewed as the Chinese ambassador when it came to all things tech, Beijing began to grow wary. Remember when I said that Ma was blessed with the gift to speak and compel? Well, that gift was landing him in trouble. Ma had a bad habit of saying antagonizing things that the CCP interpreted negatively. And when you add this to his being viewed as the Chinese voice, the CCP certainly did not like that situation. Official uneasiness was becoming clearer, and Ma failed to take this as a sign to slow down and instead ramped things up, further antagonizing the CCP. The Financial Times said that a source close to the government said of the situation, what he was saying both publicly and privately could be embarrassing for China. After he returned home, they always had to go debrief him and ask about his trips. Ma was already under scrutiny and in trouble, and he didn't even understand the severity of it. This made him careless with his speech at a time when he should have been careful. Now, many of the things that Ma said were correct and still stand true to this day, but in China, that kind of talk from an influencer like him is not acceptable. This is why his speech at the Bund Financial Summit in Shanghai of October of 2020 would be his last of that magnitude. When he was talking on stage, Ma made the reckless mistake of opposing the Chinese financial world. He ridiculed the system, calling it old and outdated, while at the same time pushing for newer, better regulations that he felt would advance China more. What Ma was saying was that China's financial system needed improving. But what the CCP heard was Ma inciting people to want change. According to President Xi, Ma had openly ridiculed the CCP's systems, and he was attempting to create a new order of things. If you know anything about China and the CCP, you know that change is not acceptable in any form. Once the CCP's vice chairman of the party propaganda department gave a speech urging Chinese media to be aware of individuals and companies that would try to use wealth and resources to manipulate public perspective when it came to regulation and order, it was over. His exact words were to guard against the risk of capital manipulating public opinion. Once this statement was said, everyone knew that the jig was up. Ma was officially a target, and the CCP was now the hunter. And as with all the prey that the CCP hunts within its borders, Ma was not to escape. Shortly after the political speech and rebukes had occurred, Jack Ma disappeared from the public eye. This was very weird, as Ma had built his empire on the back of his image, as the flamboyant, ever-present billionaire. He was the Iron Man of China, and now the Iron Man was gone. Events that had been scheduled for him months prior were suddenly canceled. This was inclusive of his role as a judge in an African talent show that he created. Even in the business sector, the General Association of Zhejiang Entrepreneurs that Ma chaired called off its annual conference in the absence of the chairman. Ma was absent, and it was showing. The creator was seemingly abandoning his creations. All of these actions served to scare customers and shareholders alike. Some rumors said that Ma had fled, while others said he was in jail. Anyone with an opinion shared theirs, and the once strong Alibaba empire went into mayhem absent its king. Because Ant's IPO had been in the works, it too suffered alongside Alibaba. Ma would later appear in a few videos online speaking at an empty school in what was a clear attempt at publicity, but it was too mild. Jack Ma's disappearing spells would continue with him disappearing and popping up only for him to disappear again. This is still something that continues to this day. Whether the authorities are behind this or not is not officially known, but what everyone understands was that Ma had poked the bear, and the bear was lashing out. How badly was President Xi lashing out? Well, let me show you.
Ant Group.
Paying the price for criticizing the Chinese state.
The Chinese government has really taken aim at
Antitrust investigation was announced.
To appease the regulators and also distance itself from the Alibaba Group holdings.
What was the loss? A whopping $37 billion.
Following a pretty lengthy crackdown by the Chinese authorities.
under a lot of pressure from Beijing.
Has made an example out of Jack Ma to all Chinese entrepreneurs.
President Xi set his dogs of war after everything that Ma owned. Ma had grown big, and he must have thought himself too big to fail. President Xi sent his war dogs to show that this was not the case. Under his rule, everyone could be a target, including China's richest man. The first thing officials did was to cancel the much-expected Ant IPO. This is something no one ever thought would or could happen, as Ant was just days away from its launch, and it had already been projected to have the biggest IPO in world history, something that Xi quickly halted. As big of a move as this was, it was only the first of many. After stopping the IPO, regulators began to disassemble Ant piece by piece. China's central bank ordered Ant to form a separate financial holdings company that would be subject to the kind of capital requirements applied to banks. That's when the door opened for the big state banks and other types of government-controlled entities to buy into the firm, taking large stakes and placing what was once Ma's baby firmly into the CCP's hands. The government also tore apart Ant's money market fund, a pool of capital that was to serve as the bank for the company. Once the CCP had its hands on it, the fund went from this to that. It basically went down to almost half of what it once was. When you realize that we are talking about massive amounts of money, billions actually, you can see how this becomes very worrisome. As bad as all that was, it was not enough punishment for Xi. President Xi was set out to make an example that nobody was above the party, and Ma was the perfect candidate to display that. In April of 2021, Alibaba was slammed with a record fine of $2.8 billion for antitrust violations. And just like in several cases that we've explored before, when the CCP wants you guilty, you will be found guilty. As time went on, Alibaba was struck with more fines for more violations. Certain key services were cut off, further reducing Alibaba's revenue alongside the negative effect of lowering the stock price. One of the services was the overnight removal of Alibaba's highly popular internet browser, which up until that point had been the number 2 browser in the Chinese market, with over 400 million active users. By the time the CCP, through its regulators, was done with it, the browser wasn't even in the web store. Alibaba, at its worst, fell to about a fifth of what its share price used to be at its all-time high. It has since rebounded, but it still remains at prices that are 50% below all-time highs. Alibaba has not and will not recover from all of this. It's been dismantled and hurt to a point where it can never grow and rise up again to its former glory. That is to say nothing of the Ant Group, which has since been renamed, and the spoils shared among the CCP's chosen. Together with this, Jack Ma's personal fortune has dwindled down, removing him from his seat as China's richest man. Aside from that, even Ma's legacy was chipped at. He was removed as president from his Hupan University, an elite business university he started in 2015. Now the university was forced to suspend new student enrollment, and its credibility is in shambles, with little hope of reopening at its former capacity. Nothing from his previous life was left unscathed. President Xi succeeded in fulfilling his goal of using Ma as a demonstration. Ma and his empire were humbled, and Xi remained supreme. The truth is this: in China, the CCP comes first, and everything else is secondary. Looking at the history of tech companies in China, you will see that no tech mogul has succeeded in China without running afoul of regulators or stepping over their ever-shifting lines. That is also a big problem in China. There are invisible lines that are not to be crossed, and more often than not, people find out what those are after crossing them. Wang's pre-Meituan venture, the Twitter-like Fanfao, was shut down in 2010 after being blamed for stoking violence in Xinjiang. In 2018, ByteDance's Shang shuttered his first breakout hit, a seemingly harmless app that collated jokes that were deemed too off-color. Beijing all but froze Tencent's gaming empire, the world's largest, that same year, after President Xi's government blamed addictive blockbusters such as Honor of Kings for myopia among youth. These are all stories of tech moguls that met the short end of the stick under Xi Jinping's rule. I think Andrew Polk, co-founder and head of economic research at Trivium China, a Beijing-based consulting firm, summarizes all this best. The current clampdown is just the next batch of business people being reminded by the government, you can be rich, you can have a powerful company, but you gotta play by our rules. For me, it's less of a surprise that Jack is getting his comeuppance and more of a surprise that it took this long. What's left for Jack Ma is the big question. All that's clear for now is that the mogul is laying low and keeping to himself. Whether he's trying to bide his time or remove himself from the CCP's radar is something that's still unknown. For now, all we have is a cautionary tale and a ton of questions that only Jack Ma can answer. This video is brought to you by our Patreon. As I mentioned earlier, YouTube has a bad habit of restricting and demonetizing my videos. This is why I launched a Patreon where you guys can support the videos directly. If you guys enjoy the videos and have the financial ability to support them directly, please check out the link in the description. These videos are mainly funded by Patreon supporters, and honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Because this way I can cover any news I want and not have to worry about if the topic is advertiser-friendly or not. So check out the Patreon through the link in the description. And again, thank you so much for watching.